Lawyers of Reddit, what was your oh crap moment in court? Mine actually happened while I was sitting in the jury pool during voir dire. The case was a double homicide, and the jury pool filled the entire courtroom. If you're not familiar with voir dire, it is when the lawyers ask the potential jurors questions to determine who they want to sit on the jury and who they want to exclude. It is a long and boring process for almost everyone involved, but 9/10 it's the most important stage in a case. So the lawyers are asking us questions, and if that question applied to you, you raised your hand and they handed you a microphone to answer the question. The question asked was, do you or anyone you know have prior knowledge of this case? So this older gentleman raised his hand, is handed the mic, and proceeds to say, yeah, I work at a police station as a janitor, and I heard two detectives talking about him, points to defendant, and they were saying he was about as guilty as sin. We all kind of stared open-mouthed at this guy, and I started chuckling because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Naturally, the defense attorney asked to approach the bench, followed quickly by the state prosecutor. After some quick and energetic whispering, the judge addressed the man. Do you realize what you just did? You potentially poisoned this entire jury pool. I will be calling your boss and you will be hearing about this. You can count on that. You are dismissed, sir. But this isn't over. The man was escorted out, and then the judge addressed the remaining jury pool, which was still in a mostly packed room. Now I want you all to disregard what that man just said. I'm sure if any of you were ever accused of a crime like this, you would want a fair trial and not be condemned based on the words of one old man. I have been in court many times since, but never have I seen that level of downright jaw-dropping absurdity again. Was in court for a directions hearing. The judge was already in a bad mood and asked why we were here for such a seemingly pointless litigation, without giving details. He was right. The barrister starts to make our case, and I am taking notes about areas we need to further explore when I hear, "Excuse me, why were you so rude to me?" The client, who had been told to not come, had come to court that day and was evidently incensed by the judge questioning the merit of their case. They berated the judge for about 3 minutes, with me and my co-counsel first stunned and then trying to shut them up, before he adjourned the hearing. The case did not go very well, to my client's surprise and fury. Big sigh. Those are always the ones who are totally shocked when it doesn't go their way. We were prosecutors then. 18-year-old defendant applying for bail. He needed a residential address and got his dad to show up at court to confirm that the family home was available to him. Defense lawyer gets old dad to confirm that son can stay at family home. Dad says yes. My fellow prosecutor gets up and asks dad, do you really want him home? Dad goes off the deep end. Jesus. The grief he's brought me and his mother. Out all hours. Taking drugs. Hiding stolen property in the garage. All night parties. I'm on antidepressants and the wife's had a nervous breakdown. Dad goes off on one for 5 solid minutes. As the defendant gets taken back to the cells, he calls out, thanks dad. I owe you one. Obligatory anal. But in a pre-mediation meeting once for an uninsured motorist claim, an insured had alleged that she couldn't walk without the aid of a cane and had a pronounced limp after an accident due to a low back injury and a shooting pain in her right leg. The doctor notes didn't support anything but a subjective injury after a few weeks, but she was still treating 2 years later and going to new physicians. So, we had her followed covertly to see if she was really using the cane and had a limp, etc. We got footage of her carrying like 4 grocery bags in each arm to her car in a Walmart parking lot, walking perfectly fine. When she got to her car, she even opened the trunk of her SUV without putting any bags down and lifted the gate with her knee partway. Her elderly mother was with her using a particularly decorative purple cane with a flower pattern on it. They followed her to a doctor appointment an hour later and she's on video using her mother's cane and walking with a limp that would give Forrest Gump a run for his money. But never did follow up on how that played in the mediation. But I can only imagine it gave some attorney an oh crap moment. My grandfather was a pie. It's amazing how freaking dumb people are when it comes to insurance fraud. person I was representing was on trial for assault in the 3rd degree and DUI. In my state, A3 means you've assaulted an aid worker or police officer and is a felony. The allegations are that he was very verbally abusive to the officers and, at one point, kicked one in the face. We're sitting at the defendant's table and the officer is testifying about the statements my guy made to him, including some pretty horrific name calling. Out of nowhere, my client screams, "You're freaking liar, frick you, you son of a b." We lost the trial. Another time, the judge asked a client whether anyone had coerced him into pleading guilty, and he said yeah, my attorney. I about crapped my pants, but he laughed and said, "I'm joking." Number. Not a lawyer, but a defendant. As a teenager, I got busted with a couple of buddies throwing eggs at cars. We were only actually in the courtroom for our sentencing. There was no trial. The judge called each of us up individually to ask us if we had anything to say. One of my friends tells the judge that he is a good kid who doesn't normally do things like this. Lie. We used to do it all the time. And that I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. I wish there was a video of my other friend and I sitting in the benches watching this happen. But we simultaneously dropped our heads into our hands because we couldn't believe that idiot just said that. The judge was not pleased, and she took the opportunity to remind him that going to a store, buying eggs, going to another location across town, and then throwing those eggs at cars was not just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. I am sorry, Your Honor. I didn't know I couldn't do that. I'm not a lawyer, but I was a character witness for my childhood dog in a civil trial between our neighbors and my parents. Opposing counsel was questioning me. I wasn't even out of elementary school at the time, and he asked if our dog was aggressive. She was a Rottweiler and very loving and incredibly protective of me and my siblings. His final question to me is one I will never forget. He asked, "Did your father tell you what to say before you came into court today?" I responded yes. Then he asked, "What did he tell you to say?" I said the truth. Now I was too young to remember the courtroom reaction, but according to my father, the judge audibly guffawed and the opposing counsel lost all the wind out of his sails. Character witness for my dog has me smiling. They're so loyal to us. We should return the favor. As a law student, we were allowed to make court appearances under the supervision of an assistant district attorney. I was doing arraignments and my aider said don't talk to the judge unless he asks you a specific question. So the judge and the defense attorney were going back and forth about when the next court date would be. The judge wanted a specific date, let's say 4/20. The defense attorney was adamant that she couldn't do that date. In my file, I had a calendar with a big X over 4/20 saying do not schedule. The judge and defense attorney go back and forth for several minutes. The judge wanted 4/20 and the defense attorney saying no. I was keeping my mouth shut because the judge hadn't asked me directly. Finally, the defense attorney relents and agrees to 4/20. The judge turns to me and says, "Do the people agree with 4/20?" At which point I say, "Sorry, Your Honor, but we cannot schedule for 4/20. The judge looked at me for a second and then just ripped into me, "Mr. Jones 1, you just heard me and the defense go back and forth for several minutes about a date you knew the people couldn't do. Do you like wasting the court's time?" It went on like that for a few minutes, him just berating me in front of about 200 people in a court in Brooklyn. Finally, after me apologizing profusely and him giving me a withering glare, we moved on and went to the next case. At the next break, the judge said, "Mr. Jones 1, please approach the bench." I thought I was really in for it then. I walked up beside the bench. The judge came down to talk to me and said with a big smile, "Don't worry about it. I was just giving you a hard time. Welcome to Brooklyn Criminal Court." Not a lawyer, but I had a big oh crap moment. I was in court for driving while suspended in a county and in front of a judge that were both notorious for putting people who did that in jail. My license wasn't supposed to be suspended. A pencil pusher forgot to press a button or something and it never got unsuspended after the time was up. I had proof of this, but I was still really nervous. The guy who went up to the judge before me walked to the table where we were supposed to stand, sat down, and put his feet up on the table. The judge asked him what he was doing and he gave a flippant answer and basically told the judge to get fricked. This seriously peed the judge off. The judge went off on this guy and the guy gave everything right back to him. Pee him off more and more. The judge ended up jailing him for contempt and had the bailiff cuff the guy and put him in a chair off to the side to await the marshals who would transport him to the jail. My name gets called. The judge is looking at me like I'm fresh meat and he is a great white shark. I'm already thinking to myself, okay, if this judge puts you in jail, run over and beat the crap out of the guy that peed the judge off so badly. He's why you're going to jail. The judge looks down at his paperwork and back at me and says, "You're Mr. My last name?" I said yes, so he said, "Yeah, we were talking about you earlier. I'm going to void your arrest and dismiss this case. Your license was supposed to be valid and you shouldn't be here." I let out a huge sigh. The judge asked me if I was okay and I said I had been a bit worried, especially given the guy that was right before me in line. The judge said don't worry about him, he won't be seeing anything that I sent behind bars for about 90 days, and laughed. That's how a judge is supposed to be. Not a lawyer but shared an oh crap moment with one. I hit something in the road and had a tire blowout while driving home from MEPS. Hit a concrete divider and wound up rolling my car. No injuries and no other vehicles involved. Received a reckless driving ticket that the officer told me was just procedure and not to be concerned with. Fast forward a month and I'm in court with my lawyer who plans on pointing out this ticket could prevent my hardship enlistment. He's not expecting it to take more than a minute because the issuing officer and prosecutor are on board. Q group oh crap moment. I'm fourth on the docket and the judge has just handed out maximum sentences for all 3 prior defendants. People are getting 6 to 12 months, having licenses revoked, for little stuff. Prosecutor gets screamed at the instant he opens his mouth. Police officer is told to shut up while answering a question the judge asked. My lawyer is told he's about to be held in contempt. I'm starting to think I'm gonna get 3 squares and a cot, just not where I planned on getting them. The judge told me to step forward while shuffling my case paperwork and my lawyer just gave me a look that said, "I'm so sorry. Case dismissed in the interest of justice, and if any more idiots waste his time with nonsense like this again, everyone is spending the night in county." Medical malpractice defense lawyer here representing hospitals doctors. This was not my oh crap moment but plaintiff's oh crap moment. For context, usually at trial, both plaintiff and defendant will have an expert physician testify as to their opinion to whether the doctor hospital performed everything correctly. I thoroughly researched plaintiff's expert, who was an ob-gyn, baby delivery, and found out he had been suspended a number of times for his own botched deliveries and giving incorrect medical testimony to help plaintiff's cases. During the actual day of trial, turns out he was not licensed to practice medicine independently without supervision from another physician and he was 1 year into his 3-year suspension. Plaintiff's lawyers had no idea about their own expert's background and they just sat there with a blank look on their face. Needless to say, during cross-examination, we destroyed his credibility and won at trial. I was prosecuting a contempt action in family court, something that basically never works, and everyone in the room could tell I was winning. The other side was unprepared, out of arrogance, and I was basically ripping this guy to shreds on cross-examination, which his lawyer didn't even think would happen, because he expected the case to be dismissed. At the end of the trial, the judge ruled for me and stated that she found the defendant's testimony to be untrustworthy. I was shocked at winning a contempt trial to begin with, but then this exchange happened. Defendant's attorney, Your Honor, now that you have found my client's testimony to be untrustworthy, I am requesting a continuance in order to prepare further witnesses. This concept is shocking in and of itself, because to even think you can bring more witnesses after you rest your case is laughable. Judge, you had your shot and you missed. Counsel. Defendant's attorney, Your Honor, there was no way I could have anticipated that you'd find my client's testimony untrustworthy and as such, I didn't have the opportunity to prepare other witnesses in support of his position. Judge, that may be an argument for your career, counsel, but it holds no water with me. See you this afternoon for sentencing. For those who didn't pick up on it, the judge basically told the lawyer on the record in front of his client that she expects him to get sued for malpractice because he fricked up so royally. That crap was mind-blowing on multiple levels. For those who didn't pick up on it, the judge basically told the lawyer on the record in front of his client that she expects him to get sued for malpractice because he fricked up so royally. Warranted for telling the court on the record the lawyer half-assed the defense. I've had a couple. Best one was when I was a youth prosecutor defense attorney in teen court. The youth defendant was on trial for assault. I asked him what happened and he said, "My friends told me I wouldn't beat up the Easter Bunny at the mall, so I did. Only time I truly could not control my laughter in court." Another, I was watching a detention hearing in federal court. Only issue is whether the defendant will get to go home until trial. This was an appeal of the court's previous decision that the defendant be held until trial. The third witness was an FBI agent, which, needless to say, is not normal at a detention hearing. The FBI agent testified that some other attorney, not the one representing the defendant at the hearing, had been taking letters from the defendant and sending them to different people for the defendant. Those letters were contracts to have the prosecuting attorney killed. The representing attorney withdrew and the defendant was not released pending trial. One more. I was in traffic court one time and a sovereign citizen who was acting fairly hostile began approaching the judge's bench. He was arrested at gunpoint, which was pretty wild considering there were 150 or so people in the courtroom. Last one. My first ever civil trial, I was representing the plaintiff who wanted to evict the defendant from her property for non-payment of rent. After presenting my case, the judge asked the defendant to present his evidence. The defendant replied, "Huh." The judge said, "Now is your turn to present your case." The defendant said, "I don't understand." The judge leans over the bench and asks, "Why are you here?" The defendant said, "Oh yeah, right." The defendant then went on a 30-minute tangent about all sorts of things, like how he only parks his car so he can see where he is going when he pulls out because that was taught when he was in the military. I could have objected, but the more he talked, the more the judge disliked him. After 30 minutes the judge finally asked, "About the rent?" The defendant says, "Oh yeah, I'm not trying to debate that, I didn't pay it. That's how I won my first civil trial." Not in court but a deposition. Plaintiff in a gender-biased harassment case that was suspected to be paid roleplay with her boss kept a very detailed frick diary on her work computer. At one point she was asked to read from the diary for the record and asked if she had written the accounts and if they were true. She was asked at several points if she wanted her new husband to leave the room while she did this, but declined. Let's just say it was extremely kinky. She confirmed it was true, and the only mention of her now husband was that he was boring in bed, but she was going to marry him because she couldn't get her first, second or third choice. He ended up leaving on his own after she read that part out and confirmed it was him she was writing about. Not a lawyer, but I witnessed my ex-wife try to argue with the judge that she couldn't be accused of kidnapping our daughter because our daughter was legally emancipated. Not a spoiler, she wasn't. At the time of the kidnapping, my ex had legal statutes written on small sheets of paper she had torn out of books in the jail library, and she kept arguing with the judge after being told that none of it mattered. After the 5th time my ex interrupted the judge with her nonsense, the judge slammed her hands down, stood up, leaned over her bench, and told my ex that she had been a juvenile court judge for 20 years and was well aware of the statutes. If she interrupted one more time then she would be held in contempt and spend several months more in jail. My lawyer held up his folder in front of his face to hide his grin during this exchange. I walked out with full legal and physical custody of my daughter, court supervised visitation for my ex, and a full restraining order. I was interning during law school prosecuting domestic violence cases. The deputy asked me to talk for the first time during a guy's arraignment for beating his wife. An arraignment is when the defendant hears the charges against them and pleads guilty or not guilty basically. When the judge calls on me to speak, I got insanely nervous and told the defendant that his charge carried a maximum penalty of 30 years, when it was actually 30 days. He freaks out. The crowd, some in the gallery were his family and friends, gasps. The judge basically stops me and says, "I think you mean 30 days, counselor," after which everyone, including the defendant, laughed at me. The evidence was pretty weak and the facts did not bear charging anything other than the lowest level misdemeanor, which, in conjunction with this being a first offense, meant that we were seeking two things primarily: counseling, anger management classes, and probation. The intent being that any future problems can hopefully be avoided, and if not, we could stick the defendant with a harsh punishment the next time when we'd hopefully have better facts evidence. I did jury service back in the 90s in the UK, a 4-day trial where an estate manager Dude in charge of the farms on a big landowner's estate was on trial for growing and distributing cannabis. The police had raided the greenhouses and surrounding land and found tons of weed in all stages of production. Dude claims that he is addicted to cannabis, and because his tolerance is so high after smoking so much for so long that he can only get a buzz from the very tips of the plant, where the THC content is most intense. Asks the court to believe that he just discards the rest of the plant, doesn't sell it, doesn't even give it away, just destroys the rest of the crop. So it's the last day of evidence, where both sides sum up their case and remind the jury of the salient points of what's been said. Dude himself has been quiet and respectful throughout, smart suit, softly spoken, stuck to his answers. I'd say the jury is not buying his claim, and as the judge reminds us, it's not about whether we think it should be legalized. It's not about whether we think he has even sold the remaining bits of his plants. All we need to find him guilty is to think that beyond reasonable doubt, he had at some point shared a single joint with a friend, and that was enough to convict him for supply on the counts against him. So the jury isn't buying his story, but we are also looking at him thinking he's quite old, isn't doing anyone any real harm, etc., is unlikely to be running a massive dealing empire. Then on that last day, the public gallery, which has been empty all week, is suddenly full of the most blatantly stonery stoners you've seen in your life. One of them is even wearing an Adidas t-shirt. The jury files in, we sit down, we look at the public gallery, and I think it's safe to say we stare at them. Defense barrister turns to see what we are looking at and visibly slumps, then glowers at the solicitor and hisses, really such an own goal. TL. DR marijuana farmer fricks up by letting his customers come to court. Plot twist. It was the prosecutor who invited them. Two high-profile men on trial for killing another guy, both ex-cops from the 80s, a notorious time in our country for police corruption. The first trial had been aborted after one barrister had made a casual comment that the other accused had already killed 2 or 3 people. Second attempt was 6 weeks into an expected 10-week retrial. All of the networks and papers were covering this trial. The gallery was always packed with law students because of the many uniquely horrific aspects of the trial. So, we're 6 weeks into the retrial. Defense 1 gets up to cross-examine a witness. Did you know of accused murderer 1? Yes, he was a cop and a drug dealer in the 80s. The court basically exploded. The judge immediately issued a non-publication order, meaning there was an embargo on all information from that day. It was early afternoon, but the judge excused the jury for the day, then spent the next day and a half deliberating over whether to abandon the trial. Over halfway through, and for the second time. The best oh crap moments are when your opposing counsel or opposing client says or does something that wins the case for you. True, in civil cases you usually know what will happen ahead of time. But in my state, discovery in smaller civil cases is more limited, and clients don't always want to spend $30k when we can get the same result for $10k. In an adverse possession case, the witness only needed to say, I use that area as my backyard, and I fully expected him to say this. It would harm my case, but I knew I could get around it. When asked about his use of the area, he said, no, I never really went back there. Didn't use it at all, lost the case for the other side, and I could barely keep a straight face. It was completely opposite of what the witness had told opposing counsel off the record. Apparently the under penalty of perjury made him change his story. I had another case about losing multi-unit dwelling insurance because a guy's place was a fire hazard. I asked him if his personal insurer knew about the fire hazard. Yeah, and the jerks cancelled my policy. I also love it when I have a difficult party on the other side and the judge rips them a new one. I had a convoluted case with a lot of parties about nothing at all. The plaintiff was heinous. The 6 or 7 attorneys were working out calendars with the judge when the plaintiff starts yelling at her attorney from across the courtroom because she didn't like that he had conceded some little non-issue. Judge told her to sit down and shut up. I was sad that the case settled because she would have been amazing on the stand. I also love it when I have a difficult party on the other side and the judge rips them a new one. We call that getting bench slapped. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.